that brings us on to speaking of how to de-stress and how to become more peaceful. I'd love to chat more about spirituality and yoga. This actually what connected us. We've met at a meditation class. Both of us are into yoga. And yeah, it's just such a wonderful thing that I know that's not a regular practice for majority of people, but for people that are into it and that have discovered it, you know, us as a prime example, it just changed our lives. So yeah, let's definitely chat about that. Yeah, so I guess maybe my first question to you would be, how does yoga help you de-stress? Because I'm sure that's what a lot of people have heard. Oh yeah, yoga, like I don't really know much about it, but I heard it's supposed to be good for you and yeah, it's supposed to help your mental health. How is this the case?
Okay, so from a scientific perspective, how it's very simple. So I was talking about the fight flight mode essentially. What yoga does when you focus on one thing and you meditate on it, your body relaxes. Your body goes into parasympathetic mode. So, parasympathetic mode or rest mode is when our body recuperates. Our digestive system is working, everything is flowing, and we need that. In fact, that's the kind of state we need to be in most of the time. Most of the time, not all the time. Um, so what yoga does, there's many things. There's also the stretching aspect of asana practice, which is the physical postures. That essentially helps to release tension from our body. Because every time we get stressed, our muscles get activated to run, fight, flight mode, right? And that tension gets stored in our body in different parts, most commonly in the hips, because that's the muscle we use to like run, right? So when our stress mode is on, we need to either run, we need to like either run or do some physical activity to release that stress. It needs to be processed. If we don't do that, it just gets stored in our body. So what yoga does through stretching, the practice of stretching essentially releases muscular tension. And that itself helps even with release of trauma that gets stored in the body, for example.
Absolutely. And I can certainly relate to that. I remember one of my yoga teachers said, after yoga, it feels like you're flying.
Yeah.
And totally, on a physical level, there's nothing comparable. No other physical exercise is comparable to yoga because after yoga, you just feel so good on all levels.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, I really recommend to anybody who hasn't tried yoga yet, just give it a go. It doesn't have to be a crazy hot yoga class with inversions, handstands, headstands. Just a simple stretch and wholesome yoga postures. Um, yeah.
I actually do do think that anything that you do can be yoga if you put your mind to it.
Yeah.
If you are focused, if you're in flow state,
Mm,
I think anything can be yoga. For example, even meditation, there's so many different kinds of meditation.
totally. Yeah.
For example, if you like playing the piano, you're really into it, you're enjoying it, you're engaged with your body, your mind, your everything.
Mm,
That is meditation, that is yoga,
mm.
you know?
And I guess for those that don't know, so yoga means union or to
Yeah.
yoke. And yeah, I can certainly see how that would work because when you're in flow with something, you are united with this activity or thing or whatever that is.
Exactly.
Mm,
And it can be any activity because, a lot of people might not be open to the idea of going for a yoga class. That's fine. I think even going to the gym can be yoga.
mm,
Going for boxing can be yoga.
mm,
Running,
mm,
another example.
mm,
And not just physical activity,
mm,
because yoga means union. It
mm,
can be any hobby, drawing, reading, slow activities where your mind is focused.
mm,
The purpose of yoga, the purpose of the asana is to focus your mind.
mm, yeah.
That's why you need to breathe into it so that your mind is not drifting. And that is when you're practicing correctly.
Yeah, I 100% agree because a lot of the times, especially in the Western world, when we're talking about the physical practice of yoga, it's more about exercise, workout.
Yeah,
It's not about it. It's about the connection of mind and body. And if you're not breathing properly, which by the way, you have to do if you want to do yoga.
100%. If you don't breathe properly, it's not yoga.
Yeah,
It's
physical exercise.
it's some
Yeah.
physical exercise, but I believe that incorporating the breath into it makes any exercise yoga makes, and also makes it more beneficial for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do think that the physical practice of asanas has a unique benefit than other physical exercise though. Just because of this combination of postures, because and that's a more spiritual aspect, because that the shape of the postures is meant to bring more energy into your body and also flow the energy from the lower chakras to the upper chakras. So it's more about like balancing the energy through the physical practice. Whereas I feel like other physical exercises might lack that.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's definitely that aspect of yoga. And I also think there are other traditional kind of martial arts practices in the East which have very similar spiritual elements to it
Amazing, yeah.
and probably have that kind of an effect on your body.
Totally true. Okay, so that's the physical part of yoga. That helps you de-stress.
Yeah.
However, there are many aspects of yoga as we touched upon, and there are 8 limbs of yoga. So physical practice is only one of them, but other kind of aspects also help you de-stress. So I'd like to touch on meditation a little bit because I've actually
Yes.
recently been to your meditation class. You were absolutely amazing. It was a yoga nidra class, which is just an incredible meditation to relax, to get in touch with your body. It was, I think, one of the first meditations I've ever done just of YouTube. And yeah, forever it just changed my life. So why is it that meditation, this other part of yoga, helps you de-stress?
Um, Meditation helps you de-stress. The same reason why if you have a good night's sleep, you're de-stressed and you're relaxed. Essentially, it takes your brain into a meditative state, which is so there's different brain waves. I need to revise my neurology, but um, there's beta waves, alpha waves, theta waves, and something else. But essentially, what meditation does is um, it takes you into more relaxed brain state, and that is restorative in and of itself. Um, so you know how when we're awake and we're about to go to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
there's that in between phase where your body is really heavy. That is the alpha wave state, and that is where yoga nidra happens. And I think yoga nidra is quite special in that way. And I like how now neuroscientist Andrew Huberman talks about it as well.
Yeah, not non-sleep deep rest, he also calls it. It's
Yeah, he
becoming more
calls it.
popular. And by the way, for those who don't know what yoga nidra is, could you briefly explain
Yes.
what it is?
So yoga nidra is a specific type of meditation. Um, what it does is it brings you into a really relaxed state by guiding. You need a guidance for this, and the practitioner lies in shavasana, which is corpse pose, which is the most relaxing aspect, and you relax each and every part of your body, essentially releasing tension from that body, and then you go into, it's actually quite similar to lucid dreaming state. It's that kind of state. So you have visualizations and you have like then you focus on different senses and things like that. It's just one thing at a time, one sense at a time. And then apparently um one yoga nidra session is as restorative as a 4-hour nap.
Yeah. I'm sure this will get more popular the more people learn
100%.
about it. Yeah.
100%. And um, yogis have for ages known how to manipulate their body and mind because that is the purpose of yoga, essentially. Samadhi, the final limb. I know we've like skipped bits, but I think we need to talk about the purpose of yoga, right? It's to become enlightened, reach nirvana or samadhi or whatever. And there's not just one way to do it.
And I feel like that discussion might put some people off, but I think
Yeah.
it's very important to understand what are all those practices lead to. And you don't have to kind of have this goal in mind as an obsession. It's just if you want it, it's there, and this will help you get there. And if you even if you don't get there, it's already extremely beneficial for you on all levels.
100%. I think we also need to recognize that we don't need to be obsessed with a certain goal or a certain identity. We we need, like, the journey is the destination and the destination is the journey.
Wow, that's beautifully said. Yeah,
So I think it's the purpose of yoga is to be more present in the moment as well.
totally. Yeah.
to realize that this is it. It's really to simplify the thoughts, the mind, the body, and connect with our true selves.
Awesome. So we were talking about the meditation and why it helps you
Yes.
de-stress.
Yeah, so meditation essentially is just a restorative practice.
Yeah.
I need to do more research on the scientific aspects, but essentially the principle is it activates your parasympathetic nervous system and helps your body to reduce cortisol levels or stress levels. That is the basics of it. And there's a lot more scientists who talk about meditation in detail. And I think Andrew Huberman is one of them. So I highly recommend if people are really like into the science of meditation, because I haven't been deep into that as yet.
Yeah, I think he has a great episode on meditation, also a couple of hours on his podcast. And one of the books that I thought was very helpful on like the science of it is Becoming Supernatural, but by Dr. Joe Dispenza. He talks a lot about this different brain waves, and he's got illustrations, and he measures data actually to kind of scientifically show the difference.
Yeah, there is actually a lot of data showing the benefits of meditation for pretty much every chronic illness, including things like diabetes. It improves your insulin sensitivity. IBS, it's actually one of the treatments even I had learnt about in medical school, that IBS meditation really helps. So there is plenty of scientific literature showing that meditation is useful.
This is like one of the trends that I love, because certain trends I really disagree with, but now I feel like there is a trend for meditation. You know, people are screaming and talking about it from all fronts, and there is a reason for it, because it is life-changing, because it really helps you understand how your mind is just non-stop chatting to you, and most of the time it's nonsense. And it helps you wake up and be more present, control your thoughts a little bit, chill out, calm down, de-stress. It's, I mean, who would not want those things? It's so much better than any pharmaceutical pill there is on the market.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, if we go back to think about how people used to live like so many years ago, a few generations ago even, the amount of stimulation they had was way less. People were regularly meditating. Sure, they weren't like labeling themselves as doing these many minutes of meditation, or I'm doing this yoga nidra or that. But I think like a few generations ago, everyone was meditating. They had their own hobbies that they would do. They would spend so much time in nature. You know, people would just observe things for a long time. Kids are always meditating.
Yeah. Always at play as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very important.
Don't take life too seriously.
Exactly.
They fall, they get up. It's really amazing to observe. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's also an important aspect of this whole journey, is to realize that, firstly, you are not your thoughts. Don't get too attached to any one thought. It might not mean that much as you think it does.
This is going to shock some people and rock their world, but no, you don't have to identify with your thoughts.
Yeah.
And you are not your mind, and you're not even your body.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
Yeah, well, I'd love to dive into who we actually are. Again, this is gonna be a shocking conversation for some, but yeah, totally. I mean, that really changed my life as well, because I thought I was the ego. I thought I was the mind. This is my identity. This is my true self. But no, this is really made up a little bit, to be quite honest. And yeah, a lot of people might not be ready to hear it, or they might, have a lot of resistance hearing this kind of stuff. But I prefer to live in the truth, or try and seek the truth.
I love that you mentioned the word truth, because I was also going to say that, look, there are some universal truths that we all know. For example, we know that we breathe in oxygen, we give out carbon dioxide. The oxygen comes from trees. Carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere. The water vapor that we breathe out becomes the clouds. And then the clouds produce rain, which nourishes the food that we eat and everything around us. So, what does that mean? It just means that we're not separate. We are part of this beautiful, intertwined ecosystem in nature and in the universe as well. And I think that is the truth. If you say that to anybody, nobody's going to disagree with that. But once we feel that and live that truth, I think that is what spirituality essentially is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that brings us very nicely into the topic of spirituality. Yoga is inherently a spiritual practice. I think I remember somebody saying it's a spiritual practice with physical benefits as opposed to a physical practice with spiritual benefits. I really agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, as I said, like yoga, when I think of yoga, it's not just the asanas, right? It's all the other elements of it. It's a way of living. There's the yamas and the niyamas, the things you should do, shouldn't do. Then that's external yoga, asana, and then pranayama, and then the internal yoga, which is like the light enlightenment route. So essentially, yoga is a lot of practices, and I will say that definitely asana practice helps with discipline and kind of to focus your body and mind into that pursuit of spirituality.
How, what was your journey like to spirituality? How did you become spiritual, if you can explain briefly?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think I was actually always spiritual, um, because I always knew about these universal truths. It's just that, so like I used to read a lot of science books growing up. I loved biology and I loved physics. Physics, I feel like it's a very spiritual subject. So, there are some universal truths that we're all made of stardust. We're all made of like the same atoms and molecules. There's literally no difference between us and, I don't know, that tree over there, for example. That is the universal truth. The Big Bang, for example, we all came from one. What does that mean? That means that we are not separate. We're all connected, right? And when we die, our energy is just going to dissipate into the universe and become one with the universe. So obviously, I didn't vocalize all of these things back then, but I think, and also like growing up in an Indian household, I always had the pressure to like perform and do well in academics and stuff. So I really tried to stay in the system by forcing myself to be really ambitious. But my body said no. And I was like, yeah, this is not for me. I can't stay in the system, I think. And the hard part is realizing the truth and then continuing in the system. Yeah.
Wow. That is amazing. And I also feel like, for Indian people especially, India is a very spiritual place, and a lot of spiritual seekers go there.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your culture had influenced that, like in terms of like the spiritual aspects? I know because you were born into an Orthodox Christian
Christian.
family, yeah.
Yeah. I was born into Orthodox Christian. So, about spirituality in India, I would say that yes, there are a lot of religious people. I don't think blindly following a certain religion or a set of rules is essentially spirituality, but I do appreciate that that has value to people in their lives for whatever reason. So, for me personally, my family was very religious Christian, worshiping Jesus and all of that stuff. But when I read the Bible when I was quite young, I knew immediately, firstly it's not scientific, so I was like, this doesn't make sense. It was quite sexist, which put me off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I dismissed it very early on. Um, and I did have a phase where, when you're really young, you do tend to be obsessed with identity. What am I? Am I an atheist? So I did have my atheist phase. Um, but it was really, I think, after I moved to London, or like maybe from a few years ago when I started connecting more with nature, that my spiritual world truly opened up.
Hmm. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And for people that are kind of exploring this topic,
Mm.
what would your advice be? How should one approach? They're thinking, oh, I am kind of questioning my beliefs. Maybe I'm atheist, maybe I'm theist, maybe I'm whatever.
Mm,
Spirituality kind of almost sounds mainstream nowadays. I
it
sometimes
does.
meditate. What should I do to explore this to really understand whether it resonates or not?
Okay, so the answer to that is, I think, stop seeing yourself as separate and start connecting the dots. So if you're like, for example, if you're having a conversation with someone, be in the moment with them, connect with them. If you're outside, connect, observe, understand, question things. And I think questioning things is really important because there is this trend of like a lot of people from the West going to India and like blindly following a guru or whatever. And
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
because again, what is that? It's a quest for identity because we are obsessed with identity. The purpose of spirituality and yoga, however, is to let go of every single identity that arises in your mind. And that means letting go of everything that you have identified with your past, your present, your future, your career, your gender, even everything,
Hmm.
I would say.
I so agree with that. I think the number one thing that, as you say, like to connect, it's also about cultivating awareness
Yeah.
of everything.
Yeah.
And meditation is such a great tool for that because it makes you aware of your thoughts. The,
100%.
the first thing that people are experiencing when they start to meditate is they start to notice how loud their mind is and they can't shut it up and they get frustrated. But that's actually the first crucial stage, is to notice, just to be aware of how crazy the world is inside your head.
Exactly.
And when you start being aware of that, you start being aware of other things, like your connection to nature, your connection with other people, the present moment.
Yeah.
All of those things that cultivate awareness, really just the quality of life that comes to it, I don't think is comparable to anything else. It really influences everything.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think people have this idea that meditation is about not thinking.
Mm,
It's actually just like watching clouds go by, you know? Your thoughts are just clouds. You just observe them go by
mm,
and you focus on your breath.
mm.
Whenever anything goes wrong in the world, even the darkest moments in your life, you need to come back to the breath, you know?
Yeah. I would also add, you're so right about, not blindly following anything. That's why yoga is a practice.
Yeah.
Yoga doesn't ask you to believe or to accept or to worship anything. It's
No.
just you practice. If it works for you, carry on doing it.
Exactly.
You practice and observe how it affects you on all levels. If you
Yeah.
like it, give it a go. It's nobody's gonna force you to stay. It's not a cult, like
Exactly.
people have this feel like, oh, you're gonna start doing yoga, you're gonna get into a cult. Not necessarily. Just do your practice, just see how you feel. There, don't put too much pressure on yourself. And also get in touch with your intuition. Your intuition will never harm you. A lot of the times I see people being unsure about certain things,
Yeah.
and then they go ahead with it anyway.
Yeah.
I would say be very, very careful of those inner signals because they're there for a reason.
100%. I want to talk about this quote from the Bhagavad Gita, which I love. Yoga is the journey of the self, through the self, to the self.
Oof. Wow. I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's such a beautiful line. It's always stuck with me.
Yeah.
I haven't even read the whole Gita, just bits and bobs, but I feel like this sentence really summarizes what yoga is about.
Okay. How about what is the self?
Ooh, that's very interesting.
Mm.
Um, what is the self? I think the self doesn't exist. I think the self is an illusion.
At least our conventional understanding of the self.
Yeah, a conventional understanding of the self is just about the prefrontal cortex, like, our that's like a small aspect of our brain. There's
Mm.
so much happening in our subconscious mind, our conscious and our unconscious mind. For example, in our dreams, our deep sleep. But beyond that, I think, um, as I mentioned, we're all connected. So there is no self without us or we, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah. we're part of this system. We're part of the earth. We're part of the universe.
Mm.
We are the universe.
Mm.
So I don't know if that answers the question,
Mm.
but we're just beings in this universe trying to understand ourselves,
Mm.
and we are the universe.
Mm. Wow. So much to unpack here. I wish we had all the time in the world, but we'll try and work with what we have.
Yeah.
I'd say for me, like when I first read the Bhagavad Gita, I think I haven't finished it. I have like a couple of pages left, literally. But the self that is described in the Bhagavad Gita that talks more about Atman or the soul that's inside of you, and the Western thing that we call self is more like the ego
Yes.
or the made up illusion in our head of what we are. And
Yeah.
Sam Harris talks a lot about that. He, I think, went to Andrew Huberman's podcast as well. And he said that, well, most people, all people live with an illusion in their head about what the self is.
Yeah.
Because if you try really deep inside you to look for the self, you're not going to find it. It's not there.
Yeah.
It's really this consciousness inside of us
Yeah.
that makes up this thing inside of you, creates stories about yourself.
Yeah.
That is called self. Because if tomorrow, God forbid, somebody loses, their memory and starts with a clean slate, they're gonna create a new story. Is this them or is it a different person?
That's such a good. That's so interesting. I think it's so complicated because as you said, in the Western world, and even though I'm from India, I have grown up in a very like westernized upbringing. We identify with our ego, the thoughts that go on in our head. Like, okay, for example, I'm sitting here and my mind is like, oh, I'm talking to Veronica. I wonder what she thinks about what I'm saying. We don't need to identify with that thought. What lies within us is peace, bliss, and just pure energy, really. And I think that is how yoga defines it as well.
Absolutely, 100% agree. I think for me, what helped me most about really understanding who I am is Michael Singer, and his book Untethered Soul. So I'm reading that at the moment. I actually finished it the other day, but he just talks about it so beautifully. It's like, what is the constant like in your life? It's consciousness.
Exactly.
If you switch off the consciousness, you're not it. If tomorrow, I decide to change careers, I'm a whatever business analyst now, but tomorrow I decide to be a yoga teacher. I'm still me. It's just a different, almost different clothing on my consciousness. So I think if you, the first step, I think, is to realize that you have this seed of consciousness inside of you, and that's the real you, not the story that you've created with your career, your family, the trauma,
Yeah.
anything really. It's not the clothes that you wear. It's not the body that you have. It's everything else is a tool and a vessel for the seed of consciousness that you're carrying.
Yeah, I like how you said seed
Mm.
because I feel like our consciousness very easily kind of gets clouded. The
Mm.
seed of consciousness, it's like a fruit, because we're in this complicated world where we are so overstimulated. We have all these false identifications. We falsely identify with our career, our job, our role in society, whatever, whatever. It's hard for us to then go inwards and realize and pick out that seed.
Mm.
We need to peel the layers one by one, And
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a long journey.
Mm. I think that's such a wonderful, first step though, just to recognize.
Yeah.
Because I do think, we are social creatures and we do live in the material world. So all those things are beneficial to us. Like obviously career, we do need money, we're not advocating to go live in a cave
No,
somewhere.
not at all. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, we've always had roles in society. Different people are good at different things and they have different roles in society. But I think the current system of overworking ourselves to sickness and death, that's what I'm against.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's carry on talking about spirituality because I think that's such an amazing topic and it really have changed my life and I know yours as well and we have really connected over that. So once you kind of go past this like initial stage of introduction to spirituality, how can you nurture the spiritual part of yourself?
I would say having a daily meditative practice of some sort. So this would mean if you can start the morning with a 10-minute meditation or 20 minutes, or how depends on how long you've got. And in the evening as well, do a few breathing exercises. Take some time out and just focus on your breath.
Mm.
You instantly feel the calmness, don't you?
Totally. Yeah.
And after that, I would say, like, have an open mind.
Mm.
Letting go of judgment. That's, I think, something really essential in the spiritual journey, because when we stop judging ourselves and others, we let go of so much.
Mm.
We don't need to make a story about other people or ourselves.
Mm.
And I don't know how it is for you, but how I used to be, because of multiple factors. Like, I would look at someone, I know that they're good at studies or they have this going on in their life, and I'm just like making up stories about them, even though I don't know them properly.
Mm.
And I'm making stories about myself as well through
Mm.
social media,
Mhm.
posting things on social media and then looking at what it looks like on the outside.
Mm.
It's like almost an obsession with a story I'm telling, you know?
Mm.
And I think spirituality is letting go of that story that you tell yourself about yourself and of others.
100%. And I think when it comes to story, I think it's also important to recognize that it's mostly the mind. Again, it's not you making
Yes.
up the stories.
Yes.
It's the mind, because we were designed, almost like the mind was designed to keep us from escaping the mind. And the mind will react in all sorts of ways of resistance, saying it's all bullshit. This is, it's not going to get me anywhere. What's the point of all of this? But all of this is just resistance because it's afraid. It doesn't like when there is change.
Yeah. I can see that. Like, when we're comfortable in a certain routine, it's hard to get out of it. Whether that's a good routine or a bad routine or a rut or whatever, it's hard to get out of it. And I think it's the same thing for the mind. We need to cultivate good habits for good mental health and
Yeah.
in our spiritual practice. It's called a practice for a reason.
Totally. I want to ask you, because I know this will probably be on some people's minds. What is the difference between being spiritual and being religious?
I think you can be both.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are religious people who believe in, let's say, Jesus, but they're not obsessed with it. It's not their whole identity, you know? It's a part of their practice. It brings them meaning, it brings them joy, whatever. But when you're obsessed with being Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever, you're obsessed with being that, and like that's all you identify with. I think that's when it's the opposite of spiritual.
Mm.
This yoga teacher I once met said that religion puts you in a cage, but spirituality sets you free.
Whoa. Wow, that was deep. So true, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also, you lose this open mind, as you were saying. Once you get involved in a religion, it's, I think there are benefits to religions
Yeah.
for sure, but what makes me sad is the mindedness. I don't know how to say it, but yeah, just being not open to other ideas.
100%. I think that's what we need to be wary of. Like, I think because sometimes religions tend to be quite prescriptive. You need to do this, you need to do that, otherwise you will go to hell, and very like intense prescriptions that of how we need to behave. That means, and like God is constantly judging us. That's why when I read the Bible, I was like, no.
Mm,
It's like constantly putting us in fear.
totally. Yeah.
Whereas spirituality, there's no rules. It's all about just discovering whatever it is you need to discover.
Mm,
Your journey is different from mine, and different people have different journeys.
mm,
And they don't even need to identify as spiritual. They don't need to call themselves, oh, I'm a spiritual person.
mm,
You know? None of that is necessary.
mm. Let's chat more about the enlightenment piece that we touched upon earlier. So you mentioned that's kind of the final, I don't want to say goal, but I guess
The last limb,
the
yeah.
last limb of yoga. So what do you understand by enlightenment? It's quite a big word that's thrown out
Yeah.
these days.
Samadhi, they say.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't quite understand a lot of it. And, you know, maybe at some point I will, once I read more and delve more into it. But essentially, samadhi is a state of being where you're completely connected with the universe. You've let go of your ego. Your ego is completely destroyed. And also, there's this concept of the three gunas. I don't know if you've heard of it.
What's a good one?
So it's like in Sanskrit, it's like different states of being, like sattvic and
Yeah.
yeah, sattvic, tamasic, rajasic. So it's also used in Ayurveda. It's like different ways of being, different things in the environment, different seasons affect your body in different ways. That's essentially what this Triguna concept is. But in Samadhi, you're even free from that. You're completely liberated from all of the kind of alterations in consciousness, alterations in your mind and body from the environment. You just are, you know? That's what I understand of it, and I'm happy to have more discussions about it, be proven wrong. I mean, there's also really interesting concept of Mahasamadhi, where yogis with really, they have obviously really intense, deep meditative practices. You can't do this in like a few days of meditation, but they're able to consciously go into death, which is super cool.
Mm.
But I do believe that definitely it's possible because they have manipulated every aspect of their physiology. They have so much control.
Mm-hmm.
There are yogis who are able to like be out in the cold for ages, be out in extreme heat for ages, and their body's okay because they've manipulated their physiology that much. So essentially, that is samadhi, and I think that's something that's like a dedicated practice, and you need to really give up a lot to reach samadhi.
Absolutely. And for me, like what I have read about samadhi is really this state of liberation. That's like what they say in Buddhism, I think, as well. And they keep saying, oh, you'll be liberated, you'll be free of suffering. And it's also, I think, called super consciousness. So we have, subconscious states, unconscious state, but this is a super conscious state. And it's kind of a state outside of your mind. It's like, really, it's like 3D, like you're just everything and nothing at the same time. It's really the way how it's described is really beautiful. And when people describe those states of enlightenment, it's a bit similar, like what we were describing earlier, but it's just written in such a beautiful way. And it's, yeah, very inspiring to see people talking about it. And I mean, clearly, I'm sure it's worth the hype if they
Yeah.
if they say things like that.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you're becoming one with the universe.
Yeah.
Like, you're just existing. You're free from all of the worldly turmoil, so to speak. Yeah, it's really interesting, but I don't know if I'm gonna achieve it in this lifetime.
Never say never.
Never say never.
Um, what what for you is a concept of a soul? Because I feel like in a Western material society, soul is kind of really associated with religion. But obviously, when we talk about spirituality, there is a big emphasis on it. Like if you read the Bhagavad Gita, there is talk about Atman, you being an Atman, being a soul. Um, what is
Yeah.
it to you?
I think essentially soul is consciousness, the seed within. That's our soul, our true self. And some people call it the source, some people call it the universe, the universal consciousness. I also like to talk about it as energy because, on a physical level, if we cut, go down to the atoms, go down to the subatomic particles, and then go even further, it's just waves of energy. We're just a manifestation of energy of some form. So I think that truth is the soul, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think there's like so much literature on it, a lot to read. Maybe you can give me some recommendations.
I am actually looking at reading a book. I think it's called The Science of Souls by Michael Newton.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's on my mind. I'd love to read more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like getting scientific perspectives because
Mm.
my brain just understands it better that way.
Yeah, I think the author is a PhD as well, so
Nice.
you'll like it a lot.
Nice. Nice.
Mm. Is there anything that I haven't asked you yet about spirituality that you'd like to chat about?
Um, Nothing I can think of, but I guess we can summarize the
Mm.
topic a bit
Yeah.
if you want.
Let's definitely summarize. So, spirituality is this amazing thing that is basically you focusing on non material aspects of yourself
Yes, 100%.
that helps you to de stress. A lot of people, myself included, find meaning and purpose in this as well. And it's really tied deeply with yoga.
Yeah, I think spirituality is just about realizing your true nature,
Mm-hmm.
your true being, and also questioning everything.
Mm.
Question everything you have ever believed, everything you have ever been told, and do what, as you said, do what makes sense to your intuitive self.
Mm.
Intuition is so important. You know, these days when we get so much health advice from people and like so much information on social media about this and that, we lose touch with our intuition. We're just listening to a bunch of random people telling us what to do.
On podcasts.
um, if someone's listening to this podcast, I don't want them to blindly follow what I've been saying, like the health advice, for example. I don't think I've said something too controversial, but even then, if it doesn't make sense to you, don't do it, Question everything that everyone tells you, question everything that you believe, and that will ultimately lead you to some universal truths.
Mm. That's very beautifully said. And I also think like if we didn't have intuition, we would not survive as a species.
100%.
Yeah.
We need to be more in touch with our intuitive self, and I think that's how we can cultivate good health spiritually as well as emotionally, socially, mentally, physically.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I guess then maybe let's go back to yoga a little
Yeah.
bit as a practice and
Yeah.
as a part of many spiritual practices there are. Why is it you think that yoga is gaining popularity in the West? Why is it not other spiritual practices like, I don't know, Tai Chi or um, I don't know, what else is there? You see, I don't even know that much.
That's a great question. There's Tai Chi, obviously. I think every culture has a lot of traditional
Mm.
practices, and yoga, like the asana practice, has gained a lot of popularity in the West. Um, I think mainly because in the West, people are so obsessed with identity that they're always looking for something. And then when they find that there's this that can give them peace of mind, they immediately latch onto it. And then they become obsessed with it. And I feel like that's why, I mean, you feel so good after doing yoga, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's needed in the West, especially. Actually, in the West and the East. I think we need these grounding practices to kind of de stress our life and to um, really be more human.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually a book I read on this. It's by Eddie Stern. He wrote a book on yoga. It's really good. It actually explains the whole history of it and stuff. But ancient yogis used to do all these crazy meditative practices, and then I think during the British Empire, like they used to like make fun of these people, and then there was like Ashtanga yoga. So a lot of people a lot of these yogis started being like, oh, yoga is about being strong, and then they started focusing more on the physical practices, and then I think once it started spreading to the West, it spread like wildfire. It just became like a huge sensation. And yeah, sadly, only the physical aspect of it became such a big thing. But it is still, I think the movement in yoga is very well coordinated. It makes you feel really good. It engages all your muscles. It makes you strong. It makes you feel gentle. I think overall it's a really good functional movement practice.
And I guess, so you mentioned Ashtanga yoga. For people who are interested in trying it out, like in yoga classes, there are so many different names.
Oh yeah.
How does one differentiate, and where should one start when looking to try out a physical practice of yoga?
Okay. That's a good question. Some people have asked me also, how do I meditate? My mind doesn't stay still. I have the same thing, like when you're practicing yoga, make sure you're focusing on your breath. It's all about focusing your mind on the breath. It's a moving meditation essentially. Purpose of that is to prepare you for deeper meditations later on. So, as per the names of different yogas, I think you can experiment, try different things for yourself. If you like a faster one, try maybe like Ashtanga, Vinyasa. I like Hatha yoga. It's all the traditional form of yoga. I love yin as well. I think it's really nice and restorative, super slow. So if you're not used to meditating, yin is a bit challenging. But and initially even I got into yoga through like faster, more like, exercise type yoga styles, but now I'm more into slower ones. So just I think explore and never forget the breath. That's the most important.
And do you need to be flexible to do yoga? Question that comes to mind of many.
No, not at all. Yoga is not about flexibility. You know, like there are some like advanced postures I've seen people do. Some people physically cannot do that. The purpose is not to achieve a certain shape. It's to feel that posture and be in that posture. It's to be. It's to connect with your true selves, to connect with your breath. That's it. Like if many postures in yoga, that's why people get injuries often when they practice asanas, because they're pushing their body too hard, and that's not yoga.
Prime example right here. I think I've had maybe 5 injuries from yoga.
Really.
And every time I tell people, they're like, how? I thought yoga was supposed to be easy and mild. I'm like, yeah, I definitely push myself too hard.
Yeah.
That's the ego.
Yeah, definitely. So when we are able to let go of the ego and really connect with what our body is telling us, I think that's when the physical practice becomes so gratifying. If you're really tired in a class, go into child's pose and just breathe. Simple. You have nothing to prove to anybody, right? So yeah, and I would say just try to do it more often. And there are like a lot of teachers. I've had a lot of experiences in London. Like some of them, I just don't like them. They're not focusing on the breath at all. That defeats the purpose of it. So that's the only one tip I would say. If you're trying to practice asana, focus on your breath.
100%. And yeah, I really feel like every time I forget my breath, my practice kind of becomes a bit more chaotic.
Yeah.
And it stops really, being yoga, and it becomes more of a workout or a stretching session or trying to jump into a handstand or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And so we touched on certain limbs of yoga, but so we touched on the physical aspect, we've touched on the meditation and samadhi. What are some other limbs of yoga that people should be aware of?
I'll need to look at my book for this.
Okay. That's fine.
So
Yeah.
we can pause actually. I have my
Okay.
book.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
There's 8 limbs to yoga, and there's the initial bits, which is the external yoga. And then that takes you to the more spiritual bits, which is the internal yoga, and then ultimately samadhi or enlightenment. So the yamas and the niyamas are really interesting, and it's quite complex, and there's a lot on it. But essentially, um, the yamas are gonna guide our practice, guide our way of life. So ahimsa is one of them. Ahimsa means non-violence. So this is actually one of the principles that Mahatma Gandhi also used to talk about a lot when he was trying to fight the British. He was like, we shouldn't be violent, we should be non-violent and protest non-violently. So ahimsa ahimsa can mean a lot of things. Non-violent in your thoughts, your behaviors, non-violent towards nature, and non-violent towards animals as well. A lot of people go vegetarian for this reason in when they go into yoga. Um, but that's not necessarily for everyone. We need to listen to our body as well. And then there's satya, which is honesty, truthfulness. Asteya, which is non-stealing. When we Stealing happens when we again become attached to external things, right? So that's asteya. And then there's actually a concept called brahmacharya, which is celibacy. So during my yoga teacher training, I like used to discuss this with my teachers, and I was like, so to be a proper yogi, do you need to like literally be a celibate and give up everything? They were like, you need to just implement these principles as applicable to your life. Um, you don't need to like give up everything and be a monk and like roam around India with in orange clothes and like not have a home or an identity or anything. You don't necessarily need to do that. But sometimes I felt like in my yoga teacher training, that's what they were implying. um, so what I mean by brahmacharya is like, don't be too obsessed with sex. That sexual energy shouldn't overpower you, and it needs to be released as and when required, in my opinion. And then there's aparigraha, which is non-greed. That means not showing greediness towards things, not buying too many things. It's like minimalism. Minimalism has become quite a big hot topic in the West. I think that's also like necessary because with capitalism, where we become so obsessed with like buying things, minimalism makes us detach more and let go more. So I think that's really essential if you want to undertake the path of spirituality.
Wow, it's such deep and profound things, really.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful to see how yogis have had it figured out for all this
Centuries.
time.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
now the West is like catching up with it.
Yeah.
So much ancient wisdom that we should just trust. They know their stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. That's what, like, I can't believe Yoga Nidra's catching up in mainstream science now.
Yeah. I find it funny that they have to rename things.
Yeah. It's sad, but I guess maybe it just makes more sense because people speak English. Um, it makes more sense to them, and for some reason, people will believe it only if it's been proven by science. And that's another topic to discuss. Scientific studies and how good they really are and how biased they are, in my opinion. So, like, the science that the West presents, a lot of it is not real science, in my opinion.
I think the best science is to practice it again and see how you feel.
Yeah.
Simple as that. If that makes you feel better, proceed. Yeah. If it doesn't, either like see if you've done it correctly or stop.
Yeah, 100%. Because there's no one size fits all, right? There's no one rule that'll work for everyone because you and I are different people. We have different backgrounds, we have different genes. We need a different diet, for example. Like, I obviously suggest an unprocessed whole foods diet, but that doesn't necessarily mean we eat the same thing, you and I. Yeah. We have different tastes as well. So it's just about finding what works for you.
We all have unique bodies.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about the niyamas as well?
Yeah, yes, please. Yeah, let's try and wrap it up maybe in 10 minutes. Yeah, cool.
Okay. So I'll just say a few things about the niyamas, things that you need to do, positive duties. So it's cleanliness, contentment. I think contentment is really important because it's about being happy with who you are and what you are in the present moment and practicing that. Practicing gratitude is an excellent way to actually implement this into your spiritual practice. Instead of looking at the things you don't have and looking towards the future where, oh, one day when I have like 5 cars and like a big house, I'll be happy. When I get like a really good job, I'll be happy. Forget all of that. Look at what you have today, now. Be grateful for that. Be grateful that you're alive and that you get to experience this beautiful existence. I think that's one of my favorite niyamas, contentment. And then tapas, which is discipline. I think discipline definitely helps in your spiritual practice. Having a daily spiritual practice to kind of get you going and take you somewhere, so that so that your consciousness doesn't get clouded, if that makes sense. And then also like reading a lot, studying the texts, and like questioning things that you've learned or you haven't learned, and like speaking to different people, having an open mind, having discussions, that sort of stuff. And then the last aspect of the niyamas is surrendering to the universe.
I love this.
Yeah. So I think because the truth is we don't have a lot of control of what happens, right? Sometimes we just need to surrender to the situation. Just if you've studied for an exam, you've done your maximum. Just let go. Just trust yourself. The rest, it's fine. If it doesn't work out, if you fail that exam, it's not the end of the world. Everything will work out and life will continue. You just need to let go. Yeah,
It's so, so hard to let go.
100%.
But it's liberating. It's so freeing once you let go of those attachments, those false ideas. And sometimes even if it's something doesn't work out according to your plan, perhaps it's for the best. And normally later in life, after some time, you're like, oh yeah, really, that was for the best.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we become too obsessed with like things needing to work out in a certain way again, because there's this idea of success that we all have like in the Western world, which has sadly become even more pervasive in India and the East, that to be successful, you need to have a really good job, paying really well in a big city or something, have like a family and kids, and yeah, it's very like career focused and money focused. It's really misdirected, I think. The purpose of our existence is not to make money and have a great job. I'm sorry. That's just not true. Like, yeah.
And it's funny how there's no focus on health, really. Health is really for those either crazy people, you're looked at weirdly if you take care of your health. Like if you go to bed early on a Friday evening instead of going to the pub or clubbing, you would be looked at weirdly. And I think that's very sad.
Yeah.
Because we have created this society that everything around you have to go out of your way consciously to be healthy.
Yeah.
The default is unhealthy.
Yeah, that's the sad thing, because what makes me upset is it wasn't like this a few generations ago. Like, if I think about how my grandma and stuff grew up, like, they were not growing up in a very rich family at all, but they were very healthy. They were growing like in nature. They were connected to each other like siblings. And of course, they had their toxic elements and all of that. That's another conversation. But I mean, at a physiological level, they were content, they were connected. Now, if you look at children on social media all the time, that's another trap for them to create false identities, right? So, yeah, I think people just need to go back a bit, be more human, spend more time being a human being, not a human doing.
Yeah, that's very true. All right. I feel like we're reaching the end of it.
Yeah, I feel like we've spoken about a lot of things.
We have. You are absolutely the fountain of knowledge. And thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I could have this conversation with you.
It's been an honor and a pleasure to chat to you. And thank you so much. You have been, really such a positive influence on my life. And
thank you.
I can't wait for people to hear what you've got to say.
I'm so glad.
Thank you for being the first guest on
You're
the show.
welcome. And I hope that you have a very great, successful podcast, and not conventional success. No definitions here.
Yeah, I hope so too. I really, you know, I am doing it from my heart. I'm not doing it to get famous, to get rich. It's really just a passion project. I really want to help people. I want to spread the knowledge. And a couple of friends already have said, you know, they liked the first episode. That wasn't even really a proper episode. So I'm very, very looking forward for people to hear. So thank you once again for coming on.